Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Americans for Limited Government podcast. I am Frank McCaffrey. We are joined by ALG President Rick Manning. We've got a lot going on, Rick. First off, do you want to explain where you are?
I'm down in Southern California, about to getting ready for a meeting with the Council on National Policy that's being held here in Southern California, and so I'm attending and will be. So I'm remote right now. I'm not in the normal studio. They do, believe it or not, I do get to go around and try to do things, crazy things like make speeches and try to raise money.
Ah, that's good.
That's what I'm doing.
Hey, and by the way, please subscribe to our channel and please help us raise money. Okay. Bernie Sanders might fall to Joe Biden in South Carolina, but is that going to be consequential in any way? Is Bernie Sanders the presumptive nominee at this point?
Well, Bernie Sanders is still has to earn it, but he certainly is the front runner by far. Biden was always expected to win South Carolina. It was essentially called his firewall state. And the reason for that is 2/3 of the Democratic electorate in South Carolina is African American, which is where Joe Biden has his strongest support. So, and Bernie Sanders has virtually no support in the African American community. So it's really a place where Sanders is at a demographic disadvantage. But the polls are now, are showing that it looks like a three-way race in South Carolina between Biden, Sanders, and Tom Steyer, of all people. And as we've discussed in the past, Steyer has really had a long commitment providing money to a lot of the coastal environmental groups in South Carolina. And so he's got an established kind of base of supporters and in the state. And the last poll of African Americans in the state showed those African Americans who were moving away from Biden because of concerns about whether or not he was electable or be able to do the job, were in fact moving to Steyer and not to Sanders or another candidate.
Okay, now Biden, to my knowledge, has never actually won a state in a presidential election. He ran in 1988, 2008, now this year, and to my knowledge, he's never actually won a state.
If Joe Biden wins South Carolina, it will be a first for him, and he's run for president 4 times. This will be the first time he's ever won a state. Other developments that have occurred is because of Bernie Sanders' rather poor performance in debates in the last 10 days, where he basically praised Castro and praised the Cuban Revolution. He really offended a lot of people who are in Florida. And additionally, he went after, in the last debate, in the American Israel Political Action Committee, and there's a significant Democratic Jewish population in South Florida, which is part of the Democratic base in Florida. And so there was a poll that came out. It's only one poll, but it shows that Sanders has lost his considerable lead in Florida and is now trailing Biden in Florida as well. So there is a lot of people rethinking whether or not they want Bernie Sanders to be their nominee. I think the truth is he's going to do well on Super Tuesday. He's going to do well enough in South Carolina, and it will be Bernie Sanders. It will be his nomination to lose after Super Tuesday, and the only people who will be able to stand will be those who can raise money. And Mike Bloomberg is funding his own campaign, so that's the Bloomberg strategy all along: is to have a one-on-one fight with Sanders and attempt to get the nomination that way. And it really puts the Democrats in a pretty untenable position where they have to either go with a has not historically been a billionaire, historically been a Democrat who's trying to buy the nomination, or a socialist who's never been a Democrat who's ignited some of their grassroots base behind him, and which no other Democrat has been able to defeat. So Democrats are in an interesting position. They're going to have it looks like they're going to end up being choosing between two people who aren't Democrats for their nomination.
Okay, now another quick question here. We're hearing cases of coronavirus being reported in the United States. The president says, hey, there is a chance that this could get worse before it gets better. Are these fears being exaggerated, or do you think this is something that could really impact this country? We know it's impacted overseas, but we could really have something on our hands that could be devastation in many ways to our markets, to our economy, to people's lives, to their health.
Well, let's just talk about what coronavirus is, and we've discussed it a lot on this podcast. But very simple. Coronavirus is a type of flu that we don't have natural immunity to because it comes from another animal, and it's kind of a disease that emanates from another animal that then becomes that humans are susceptible to. And because we've never had this particular strain or anything close to it, we don't have a capacity to, we don't have natural defenses to it. So it becomes much more virulent, much more deadly. The latest thing that I saw the CDC say was really kind of concerning, was very concerning, because I actually did the math, and they were talking about if this thing goes as a pandemic, and they think it's better odds that it does go as a pandemic and become widespread. If it becomes widespread, they think 30 to 70% of the population of the world will get it, and of that, a little bit under 2.5% of those people will die. So when you do the actual numbers, you just say 50% of the people in the world get it. Or let's just say the United States. 50% of the people in the United States get it. Let's just do the math real easy. Let's say there's 320 million people in the United States. That means 160 million people sick. Of that, you have 2% of 160 million people die from it. Then you're looking at about, 3.2 million people dead. And that is massive. Compared to the flu, on the average year, flu kills about 12,000 people.
Yep.
And so that's your comparison. We're talking 3.2 million people dead, and that's kind of giving the low average in the United States alone. When you look at worldwide, you're looking at between 70 and 110 million people dead. In comparison, in 1919, the Spanish flu, which was a similar situation, went pandemic, and it ended up killing about 100 million people across the globe right after World War One. So it really was a devastating, and this flu looks like it could be similar. The good news is, and one of the saving graces is that the president did cut off air flights from China very early. They have taken aggressive measures to try to ensure that anybody who has come in contact with the coronavirus are isolated, and so there's a lot of measures that have been taken to try to protect America from this disease before we're able to figure out how to deal with it. But the fact is, we still had somebody in Northern California, a suburb of San Francisco, announced this morning that they had coronavirus, and unfortunately, they weren't in an at-risk category. They weren't somebody who'd been to China, and so you could pinpoint how they got it. And this is a really, really hopefully we don't see more recurrences of this, but it really is. It's very, very difficult to isolate a disease once it gets loose, and this disease is loose. So the president has sought $2.8 billion in funding for the CDC specifically for this disease. He's put Vice President Mike Pence in charge of overseeing all the operations and to try to make certain that state, local, and federal agencies are coordinating appropriately to try to deal with it. And we have, as well as international. And we've got and of course the Democrats have come out and said, oh, all they're just wasting their time. We need $8 billion. And who knows? The fact is, if the president had asked for 8 billion, they would have asked for, said we need 16 billion. But the thing about money in Washington is just because you appropriate it doesn't mean you have some place to spend it at. And that's your real problem, is having the places to spend the money and providing the money to the researchers who are working overnight, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to come up with a solution. I'm confident that the president will ask for every dollar that he needs to try to get this done. But the fact is, the president's not going to be able the president can't effectively deal with something like this, because this is a biological situation that is intractable. If people start getting sick en masse, it's going to be really, really difficult. In places in China right now, there are food shortages, and the foodstuffs that are being provided are in fact, some of them are rumored to have been taken by local officials rather than distributed to the sick. And there's all those kinds of problems that exist in China, which every place is susceptible to. So I'd say right now, pay attention. It isn't something to sit there and freak out about, but start making some basic preparations with your family in terms of what you're going to do, how you're going to have some foodstuffs around, and make certain that you're able to, if you have an emergency situation, you're prepared to deal with it for weeks on end. And that's the best I could recommend. But we don't know. We pray that this gets stopped, that cure comes around, or that the virus mutates to something that's non-harmful. But right now, it's definitely worth being concerned about. But I don't think it's worth freaking out about.
Okay, now another issue here is that a lot of people think that this is fatal. Like as soon as you get it, it's over. But the reality is, it's fatal in a very small percentage. So I don't want to create too much of a panic by talking about coronavirus, because chances are, if you get it, you'll receive the necessary medical treatment.
About the places where in China where they have spotty health care and diets are uncertain, and they don't have a really robust way of delivering services. You may find a higher death rate. Right now, the death rate is 2.3% in China. In the United States, where we have much greater capacity to care for people and and move resources around to provide rapid care and help people, it's hoped that we would be able to cut that death rate significantly. The challenge is, if you end up with 100 million people sick, you overwhelm all the systems. And if the disease overwhelms all the systems, then it's going to run its natural course, and whatever that number is turns out to be. The truth is, if we've been due for a pandemic, we had one in 1919, it's 2020. We tend to get one of these things about every 100 years. And unfortunately, this one appears to be not contained in China. And we're seeing it around the globe, and markets are reacting accordingly now. And so it's a problem. And the question is, be prudent. I just believe in prudence. If you be prudent about how you do your life, you make certain if you get the sniffles, don't go out, don't go to work if you're sick. Don't gut it out. Don't be considerate of other people. Doesn't even mean you don't necessarily have the coronavirus. You can have a cold, the flu, you can have anything. Just don't share it. And I think you're gonna. And so just be cognizant that if you're ill, obviously this isn't it's something to tough out. Let the doctor know you're ill, and try to be, and don't go out and try to do normal things, because you can tough it out like I always do, or I'm sure you do, because we're guys, and guys never, we tough it out until we can't, then we're little babies. But don't do that. You're not doing anybody a favor. So if you get sick, stay at home.
Okay, now another question, Rick, another topic. Recently I interviewed a group known as Latinos for Trump. and we put it on our YouTube page, which, by the way, now has more than 900 subscribers. We're trying to get to the 1,000 mark soon, so please, please, please subscribe, please. We were talking to them, and I've gotten to know this group pretty well. They were saying that there'll be a lot of people in the Latino community who publicly will say, oh, Trump is horrible, we like Sanders, Trump is the worst. And then when they go to the voting booth, they're going to vote for him, and he'll probably have a lot of support. The reason, of course, publicly they don't want to be Trump supporters is they'll be harassed, they could lose their jobs, they could be outcasted at home or in their churches.
The sense is that it's dangerous to be a member to support Trump.
Yes.
And particularly if you're a recent, American citizen who has recent ties to Central American countries, supporting an unpopular candidate ends up being very, very dangerous in a lot of those countries. And as a result, the culture is to not support the alternative candidates. But yeah, the video, which everybody should take a look at, it's on the getliberty.org site or on the dailytorch.com site. Take a look at the video because it is a pretty extraordinary group of people who are standing on the roadside, waving flags, and you do a great job on the interviews. The people are honking as they go by, encouraging them, and it's really interesting to hear people who your main person who you interview was recently became a U.S. citizen and is very proud to be an American and supports President Trump. And she gives some compelling reasons why. And so I really encourage people to check out the video. It's also on the same YouTube channel that you can find this video podcast. So I would take a hard look at it because it's about 4 or 5 minutes, and it's a great opportunity to hear what people are thinking. Polling tells us that in the Black community, Trump, there's 3 different polls now that show Trump at between 30 and 34% in the Black community. Similarly, there are multiple polls that show that the president is in the 40s with the Hispanic community. If those numbers hold, then this president will coast to victory. The fact is, the Democrats aren't offering an alternative that makes any sense. When people are doing well financially and have jobs and believe that the president is taking the country in the right direction, they're not going to sit there and say, well, let's change directions. Now, none of us can guess what the environment is going to be, 8 months from now, 9 months from now. But it is, in fact, what we're seeing right now is Hispanics and Blacks are saying, let's take a look at it a different way. We've been doing it the Democrats' way for 50 years. It's time to try to take a look and say maybe there's a better way to do it. And the Latinos for Trump recognize that the rule of law matters and conservative values matter from a social and cultural perspective that they, from their churches. So they sit there and they say, President Trump more reflects that from a policy perspective than any of the Democrats, and that's very attractive.
Okay, now again, I'm here with Rick Manning, the president of ALG. Another issue with the Latino community is Latinos for Trump is the Cuban vote. That's going to be very important. Of course, Florida is the key swing state, and it's going to be very important to get the Cuban vote out to the poll. Now, Latino for Trump is a group that has a lot of Cuban Americans in it, and I was talking to Mayra Gutierrez about that, and she was saying that they're very, very, very passionate about getting out to the polls this year. Very passionate, and that's going to be very important. And I'll continue talking to Latinos for Trump over time because that is a very important group this year.
It's a great interview, and I would encourage people to pay attention to that because, Frank is located on the border, so he has access to a lot of people who, quite honestly, we don't hear from in Washington, D.C. And so bring those people directly to you gives you an insight into what people are thinking from different parts of the country, and it's a really good bit of journalism by you to get that interview.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, Yeah, and Mayra is someone who I've really gotten to know now just because I've been talking to her since I've done that interview, and she is a very important player here in Texas, South Texas, to get out that vote. It doesn't hurt that she's a very beautiful woman, too. You'll see that on the video. But yeah, that's an important group. That's an important group. Okay, now, Rick, on to a less serious topic. This movie that people are going out to watch, it's based on a video game from back when I was in like elementary school, Sonic the Hedgehog. Are you going to go watch the movie Sonic the Hedgehog?
I think the odds of me seeing the movie Sonic the Hedgehog are somewhat about the same as the odds that I will be voting for Bernie Sanders for president.
Or the odds of us becoming pregnant, right? Okay.
Well, you know, those odds might be higher, but I listen. I don't know. I get when people do movies that are, you know, based on video games or based on different things. And I generally find those kind of movies to be boring and dumb because they can't match the actual video game. But to follow the adventures of a hedgehog in a fictitious world has absolutely zero appeal to me. And you know, but if people want, I understand the nostalgia movement, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I'm too old to be nostalgic for Sonic the Hedgehog.
It wasn't really even that popular.
Now, if they had a Ms. Pac-Man game, then maybe it would be different. But you know, and then we have little dots eating each other. But but no, I'm not going to be saying it. I think Hollywood's job is to make money, and they come up with niche movies like this that have thin plot lines and that are designed to create a wave of nostalgia. And quite honestly, a lot of video gamers are going back and playing the older video games because they're less complicated. You don't have to you just jump in and play them and have fun, rather than having to know, you know, a 1,000-page rule book in terms of being able to even get started. So so they're easy fun to be had, and you know, so there is something to be said for lousy graphics and minimal storylines. And hopefully the Sonic the Hedgehog movie has better graphics, but I suspect the storyline's pretty thin.
Yeah, you know, one of my favorite videos on YouTube came out about 5-10 years ago. I can't really remember, but it was Mike Tyson playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, which was the big video game from my era. And he couldn't even beat the first guy. He couldn't even beat Glass Joe. And I was just like, Mike Tyson couldn't even beat the first guy.
Even I could beat Glass Joe. It was I think I could get like 3 or 4 fighters in before I'd get knocked out. But no, that's the funny thing is, you know, these video games they're great fun to play, but you know, you go in and I'm confident that there's 1 million people out there who can play the Major League Baseball game better than Mike Trout can play the online Major League Baseball game. But Mike Trout is still the best baseball player in America, and he doesn't even need trash cans to be able to hit.
Yeah, he is a great player, but man, it would be nice if he started bringing home some championships. I'm sure just about everyone says the same thing.
Yes, if you use the old-fashioned Houston method, you might have a chance. But you know, not to get too much on you there, buddy.
Hey, I'm a Nationals fan. I'm allowed to celebrate. But I think it's time for us to wrap up so you can enjoy your time in Southern California. I'm
going to be writing pieces, so I'm going to be sitting here at the desk writing away. So enjoying my time. I've got this is where I grew up, so I'd love to go out and spend time with friends and go see family. But sadly, my afternoon is going to be spent tickling the keyboards here, not making beautiful music, but hopefully putting words together in a comprehensive way on a couple of different subjects that are important that we have to publish on in the next few days. So unfortunately, the work continues even when you're sitting in 80 degrees in paradise. So,
okay, well, have a good time writing up those stories, and everybody, please subscribe. We're trying to bring this thing up to 1,000. We've got over 900 now. And so please subscribe to this webpage and have a nice day, ladies and gentlemen.
Take care, folks.